Hi everyone, I'm Stephen W. Long. This is the Writing Life, and if you've watched it all, you know that this looks a little bit different. The reason it looks different is this is a special episode. This is our 100th episode, which I would never have believed, but here we are. Generally it's me and a guest. Today we've got more people because I thought it was appropriate to bring on the folks who actually do the work and make this happen. So I'm going to, technologically, I'm not sure how we do this, but Caroline O'Brien, you've been here the longest, I think, or at least with this show. Larry Miller, you've been here long enough. Yeah. Yes. And Kyle Dodderman. And Kyle, you've been here, gone, come back, and because you came to your senses.
Yeah. You could say so.
Yeah. So, folks, I thought I'd start with, because I guess we could say different motivations. I wanted to ask these guys, what is it that drew you to this and keeps you here? And Carolyn, why don't you start?
I would say probably it was the camaraderie there at MCM, McMinnville Community Media. You know, they just let people come in and volunteer and learn how to do things. And I mean, I just really enjoyed the people there. So then I started seeing the shows as they were taped, and I thought, wow, the writing life. I want to know about this. Yeah. And I started learning on a camera, and then ended up in the control booth, and then ended up in directing, and then ended up in booking. And it's just kind of been a very nice, natural evolution.
Well, it was critical for me. Again, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be here. Now, the other thing is, I just thought as you have your own show, or did, and it's hard for me to say it, but go ahead.
Literally literary.
There you go.
It was a series of videos I shot about all the literary events, because when I first started down there as a volunteer, they said, oh, you ought to learn how to run a camera and go out in the field and cover something. I thought, oh, well, you know, there's not that much to cover. I'll go cover some of these literary. And then when I found out all these things that are happening in Yamhill County that are all literary based, I just really, I mean, it just kind of took off on its own.
Yeah. Great. Larry, how about you?
I became involved with McMinnville TV when I first moved to McMinnville. I just wanted to be involved in the community.
Yeah.
And I think you and I had met at Restore.
Oh, sure.
Correct?
Yeah.
That's correct. And you were speaking about it.
Okay.
And I decided, you know, I'll give that a shot.
Yeah.
You know, I've always been interested in technology and camera work, even though I'm still very new into the space. Caroline has helped me tremendously. Kyle has also helped a lot. Yeah. And Phil, who's not here at this time, he's also helped tremendously. So it's really been great.
We wanted to get Phil on camera, but somebody has to run the store, so he's out.
Correct.
He's out there.
Correct. So that's how I became involved.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Kyle, I know you've been here actually a long time.
Yeah, I started volunteering for McMinnville Community Media in 2013.
Okay.
I was a basketball announcer, and I came down and did a session of announcing, kind of fake announcing with a TV and just calling an old recorded game to learn how to do it. And I did games like that for several years, and then I ran the TV station out of the high school. And as I graduated high school, you know, they had an opening here, and I applied, and I've kind of been here ever since. Well, I did leave for a short period.
I was going to say you went back to school.
Yes.
School. Yeah.
Yeah, I went back to teach at the high school, digital media, video production.
Yeah.
We started a podcasting class there, which was really successful. And then I was offered to come back here, and, you know, like you said, I came to my senses. So.
Well, we're sure glad you did. Guys, in anticipation of this, I wondered how special is 100 episodes? So Wikipedia is the answer here. 100 shows is considered the milestone for the traditional threshold for syndication. So, you know, your grandkids may be seeing this some other time. There have been exceptions, and I thought the exceptions were fun because we beat them. The Jetsons was only 75. The Monkees were 58. And Star Trek, the original Star Trek was only 79 episodes, and we beat them. So how about that?
That's the new tagline. This show is better than Star Trek.
Yeah.
True, true,
We're farther out than Star Trek.
true.
Caroline, you and I had some conversation about when did we actually start. I think you maybe have a better recollection than me, but what do you think?
I'm thinking it had to have been, I think you must have taken over sometime in 2015 or 2016. The reason it stands out for me, well, no, it had been before that, 2016, so maybe 2013 or 14. It seemed to me, so Phil had this film group and they were shooting the script that he had written.
Right.
And we all ended up at Mike Santonet's house in the middle of the hottest summer we'd ever had, filming and all this stuff. And I sometime around then was when I started coming into the studio and covering, scheduling people and contacting writers and booking things.
Yeah.
And I think that was like 2014. Phil would remember for sure. I think it was the summer of 2014.
Okay. Well, I wanted to say we got, and you didn't hear this, I got a nice email from Mike Santonet earlier today congratulating us on 100 episodes. And I wrote him back to say, you get either the credit or the blame. Because I had been on Arts Alive a couple of times, and when Linda Philippi was leaving there, not that I would take her place, but Mike asked me if I wanted to do a show. And you maybe have all heard this, but I said, okay, sure, not really knowing what that would be, and also thinking that we would do 4 or 5 shows and run out of people. And what reminds me, Caroline, is when you say there's so many events going on, there is such a plethora of writers and writing related activity in the McMinnville area. And so there are the events, for one thing. There's the newspaper. We've had some of those folks on. We've talked to an editor, which I thought was very helpful, but primarily authors, and that's been great.
There's a nice little coming together there when, so your show was we were just kind of getting our sea legs for the writing life, and the Terroir Writing Festival had just kind of finally got their niche in, I think the first one was 2010, so they had kind of gotten into their rhythm, and I used to go that and film it for Literally Literary, so I would get in, writers and publishers and editors from that who would come on the show, and it was just a very nice marriage of different influences there.
Yeah. Well, as a bit of a segue, the first keynote speaker for Terroir was Ursula Le Guin. And, I mean, it's hard to do better than that. Let me say one of the many reasons that I like to do this, why I keep coming back. You talked about the camaraderie and the people. And let me just mention some of the folks we've had. And I keep saying Little McMinnville. How do we do this? But probably the most prominent person was Bill Champlin. And he was a 2-time Grammy songwriting winner and also a member of Chicago. When I knew that he was going to come in, I mean, to me, he's a big deal. And I didn't know if he's going to be, need only green M&Ms or I don't know. That's a different world for me. And he came in and very nice, very friendly. I asked him a question, and I could have gone out for coffee. Because where originally our programs were 15 minutes, his was 42. And just so interesting. So there was Bill Champlin. You'll remember Therese O'Neill. And, why don't you say a little bit about her? Do you remember how you kind of...
I actually saw her first book over at the library and picked it up because Courtney, the librarian, had told me, we've got this new book in, and she's going to come and speak at the library. And she's just one of the wittiest people I've ever met.
Absolutely.
So Teresa wrote 3 books now. I mean, she wrote her first book, and it became a New York bestseller.
Yeah.
And she told me she went to her husband and was like, they're offering me this contract for 2 more books. Should I take it? And her husband looked at the number on the letter. It's like, yes, take that.
That's an easy one.
She, a New York Times best-selling author now. She lives up in Portland.
Yeah.
And I mean, she just and she's not used to public speaking. She said, I just sit in a room and write. And I said, hey, we're all there. We're all there with you.
Yeah.
And she just really was a delightful guest.
She was delightful. Some people have a comfort animal. She had a comfort daughter to come with her. So, and I knew you would remember that. But guys, I want to ask you, Kyle, is there somebody that stands out that you remember?
We had Ben Gorman on the show,
yes.
And he wore that fantastic that suit jacket with the skeletons on it, and
right.
he had the cane with the skeleton. It was such a striking visual to me. I thought that was really enjoyable. His picture, I think, is still out on the wall over there. But I remember that one really. He was very, very nice, very intelligent.
I've had people comment on him. In fact, I want to follow up on that. But do you have a favorite? Somebody that stands out?
I don't know if I always just remember the last guest.
Okay.
And I think our last guest was Joshua Bates.
It was.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I thought his story was very, very fascinating.
He was fun, and because we've had that range, so from a New York Times bestseller to a fellow just starting out.
Correct.
But he had the determination, has the determination. I think he's going to be successful.
Yes.
Well, let me tell you a couple of the people that I remember. This was, well, I mean, Kim Stafford, of course, and terrific. But there was, we had a guest named Rosemary Douglas Lombard. And she was, I think this is the right terminology, she was a zoologist. And her specialty, her area of study was turtles. And in fact, we had her on the show for her book, Turtles All the Way Down. And this was a book of poetry, a chapbook about turtles. And the thing that I remember is the cover art was a turtle, she said, drawn by the turtle. And be respectful. And I said, in all honesty, how do you do that? You know, do you like band a pencil to its head or what? And she said that she would hold the turtle to a mirror and then show the turtle the paper, and it would make a motion which she would duplicate. She'd take it back to the paper, and it would and make a motion. And she wound up with a line drawing of a turtle. And I remember saying to her, a skeptic might challenge that and say that actually you're doing that, just like a Ouija board. And she looked at me and said, as a scientist, you should ask those sorts of questions. So, but the juxtaposition, she was terrific. And so here now to the outfit. Gina Fluharty, do you remember? And she came in, multicolored hair, a sundress with skulls on it, and the two guests couldn't have been physically more different. Their presentation was completely different. And her genre was paranormal romance. And I'm not sure that I can even repeat some of the things she said about what ghosts are up to. But so now, I think, Larry, you were here with Sean Davis?
I don't know if I remember Sean
Okay.
Davis.
He, in fact, let me tell you about him. He was, he won a Purple Heart. In fact,
Oh, yes, I do
numerous
now. Yes, now I
military,
remember.
and his book was The Wax Bullet War.
Yeah, now I remember.
And he was so impressive.
Yes.
I mean, physically he was impressive, but do you recall? He'd run for mayor of Portland and
Right.
come in fourth. How do you do that?
Right. Yeah, I do remember him. He was very, like you said, impressive. He had a great background.
He did.
And I'm just going to say this. Not every interview that we do, it seems like you have to kind of pull out the answer or
Sometimes.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But with him, it was very fluid.
Absolutely.
And it just continued. And you could have had a conversation for hours.
Okay, great segue. We had scheduled him for half an hour, and it was so good. We shut down the show. I asked him to stay. We fired it up again and did a second show.
Right.
And that wasn't enough, but you got to let him go sometime.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Oh, I got a kick out of this. So Rosemary's poetry chapbook, Turtles All the Way Down. And you may know where that comes from. Caroline?
Isn't that from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
No, actually, good, but it's a hint.
Discworld. It's from Discworld. Yes? Terry Pratchett?
No, but no. In fact, you need to shift gears to religion. This is Hindu mythology, that the world sits on the back of an elephant and the elephant stands on a turtle.
Okay.
Somebody asked her, well, what does the turtle stand on? And the answer was, well, it's turtles all the way down. So follow that logic. All right, so we talked about why you're here. I want to talk a little bit of, and well, Kyle, I'll save you because you're so close to this. Caroline, what does MCM mean? What do you think of in terms of the community? What does MCM bring to the community?
I have to say it's a local voice. You know, it's the regional local voice of people that you see at the grocery store. You know, these are just folks in the community who come in and do these shows because they believe in the idea of getting information out there. And I really think one of the best things we have going for us is that it's ad-free. We don't answer to anyone who buys advertising. We do our content. If you like it, great. If you don't, change the channel.
Right.
And you know, during COVID, a lot of cable access stations picked up more business because I think people just want local news. They really want to hear what is the local information from people that they know.
Sure. And Larry, you had commented in an email exchange about or Caroline, I'm sorry, maybe it was you, about our local paper, or local papers in general are struggling, which I think makes this so much more important. So, you want to add to that? What for the community?
Sure, I'd add to that. I think local news is still important. And it's important to be able to provide that to your community. There's so many things. I mean, knowing what's going on in communities sometimes is more important than knowing what's going on nationally.
Oh, sure.
And sometimes I think that's getting lost and blurred right now in communication.
Absolutely.
So I think things like MCM TV gives you that outlet. And again, as Carolyn said, it is ad-free. And you're hearing exactly what's going on in your community, and it's not filtered information.
Right.
So I believe that MCM TV is important, and hopefully people within the community will continue to buy into that importance.
I think we've had, that is, the studio's had that kind of support. We talked about, it just reminded me of something. I have a friend who's an anthropologist, and he spent some time in, I think this was in Romania. As late as the 70s, he said he was there, and they had a town crier, and who stood up on a low hill and called out, you know, John Smith is still suffering with the flu, or whatever the news was. And in a sense, we're the town crier.
Yeah, I would say so. I wanted to reiterate on what Caroline said about we are not beholden to advertising. You know, we subsist on community involvement and people using our space, but we're not, you know, beholden to businesses to report on things a certain way or have a specific slant. I think one of the best things that we do here is have city council, you know, available fully to people, you know, from gavel to gavel with no editing. So when 5 years from now someone wants to go back and see, well, why did they vote down, let's say, the Gwendolyn Hotel, for instance? You can see the whole hearing from beginning to end, all the intonation in people's voices, all the questions that were asked, you know, things that get lost in the shuffle of a decision. all that is now public record because of our existence and is filmed robustly with multiple angles and high quality microphones. There's no denying, what people's positions were. And I wanted to agree with what Larry said. The things that happen at local government is so much more important than anything you see on Fox or CNN to your everyday life.
Of course.
What happens with your water bill, what happens with who's elected as the sheriff, those things have so much more impact than anything you're going to see on, national cable news. So.
Okay. Let me just mention a couple of other people. And again, I keep saying this is Little McMinnville. I don't know how we wind up with these folks. But we've had the chance to talk to Kim Stafford, Oregon's Poet Laureate.
Yeah, he was really good.
He was great. Phil Lisiandro has been on a couple of times. And again, 30 years ago, who would have thought that we'd be talking to the fella who was an intimate friend of Jim Morrison. And over this last holiday, I got to watch a movie that they made together. And I don't think there's been a dozen people seen that movie.
Wow.
But he lives right down the street. Phil Paragus was here. And Phil, if folks haven't seen that, go look it up. But Phil is an antiquarian bookseller, which is interesting in and of itself. But along his career path, he was contacted by a fellow, Jay Walker, who initially Phil thought that might be a joke, because there's Jay Walker and Lukewarm and so on. But Mr. Walker is the real deal, and best known as the creator of Priceline.com. So that was an entree into a whole new world for him. We've had Fonda Lee. She won the 2018 World Fantasy Award.
Also, on Fonda Lee, she has 3 books in her Jade World series now.
Yes.
And I think one of them has been optioned for film.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Move on just a little bit. It's been, there have been incidences lately that have reminded me how our world is changing. And maybe most recently, a couple of days ago, my son-in-law showed me on his phone a video clip. And it was sort of a Star Wars continuation, same vehicles, the X-Wing fighters and so on. And fine acting, and it looked good to me. It turns out that was created by some fans. And they just, it had special effects and everything. And I thought, okay, the world that we live in has these opportunities for expression. Well, I saw another one where a guy has a series of little clips with his dog. And I think he has a fake paw, and the dog does things with his paw. But they're clever and fun, and at least for me, why am I even here? Because it's fun, and it's a way to express that. I don't know what we'd do without this location.
Yeah, I like to think of MCM as like the ultimate creativity tool.
Absolutely.
You get to come in and, do whatever you want. We have new volunteers and people come in all the time and they ask me, well, what do you need? And I say, we don't need anything. Right. I need you to come up with a thing that you're excited about doing and come in and do 100 episodes of it. Yeah. Because you're only going to do 100 episodes if you want to do it. Yeah. So that's what I've been trying to tell people. And it can be intimidating for people, but I think the best thing that you ever did was find help. And lean on help with people, because with one person doing a show, it's likely to flame out after a little while. It's just tough to keep things up on your own.
Sure.
So you need that balance.
Okay. There's another service that maybe is ancillary to the studio, don't you have like a film club?
Yeah, we do a film club. It's going to be starting, depending on when you watch this, it'll have already started. We're going to start the new meetings this Saturday, January 20th at noon. And that is a group that comes together and produces local films and gives people the opportunity to work on local film projects with really open and transparent way of doing it. We do the scripts all together. We do the casting all together. The filming is all very, collaborative. It's, meant to be sort of an open and fun way to get involved with an otherwise really inaccessible art form. It's really tough to make a film by yourself without help or technical knowledge and things like that.
And this is an honest question.
Can I
I'm sorry,
piggyback
go
a little
ahead.
bit? I just want to piggyback on something Kyle said.
Yeah.
When you come to MCM TV, you have the ability to really test things out.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of technology where you can use your phones and digital media, but here you can actually get your hands on it.
Absolutely.
You can get there's great experience here by Kyle and Phil to show you how to use the cameras and how they work. And I know myself, I've learned a tremendous amount of information regarding that. And it's one of the few places, I think, and I could be incorrect on that you can learn, and there's not really a lot of cost that you have to put out other than your time and your effort. So that's why I think it's important to the community, and I just think that folks should embrace that because it's very rare to have it in the size of a community like McMinnville.
Yeah. I was going to say this equipment is not inexpensive. And Caroline, you experienced this. I mean, they said that you could borrow a camera. You couldn't hawk it, but you could borrow it. Yeah.
It was interesting being able to actually use the equipment and then learn how to edit. I mean, I didn't, and then it turns out I really enjoy video editing. I never knew I would like that.
Right.
I just sort of stumbled into it. But there's something interesting when Larry was talking about being able to actually make these things. It's interesting that I look at films differently now. When I watch a film, I experience the film differently now because I have a greater awareness of, oh, they just cut to that because of this. And it's the same thing with writing. Once you start writing regularly, you experience reading differently because it's much more organic.
My first writing class had a guest speaker, and his name was Creighton Barnes, and he worked for Hanna-Barbera and wrote scripts for the Smurfs, for one thing, and other things as well. But he said the difference between, as an example, a short story or a novel and screenwriting, he said, for me, if I have somebody at the window looking out at the street and I want him in the kitchen, I have to write him into the kitchen. He says, we just cut and they're in the kitchen. So, and I was going to say too, I make my wife crazy with commenting on movies. Oh, that's a drone shot. Oh, that's a POV shot. You're to blame.
And also one thing Caroline said, I watch, and I've said this to Kyle, I watch television shows and movies, especially television, so much differently than before I started working there. And sometimes I'll sit at home with my wife and I'll say, that's a mistake. And she'll say, how? And I'll rewind the television and I'll say, because of this here. And she's like, oh, I didn't even notice that. So I just think it's a valuable learning experience.
Oh, it's so much fun. We're going to run out of time, but I wanted to encourage folks, if this is at all interesting to you, come on down, talk to Kyle, talk to Phil, and get involved. I actually recently made the acquaintance of a lady who I told her about the show, and she said, oh, I'd love to do that. And I said, if this is the address, come on down, that you can do it yourself. So it's a great opportunity. It's a great resource. I love these guys and couldn't do it without them, so thank you all. And as I've said so many times, I'm lonely. Love to hear from you. StephenWLong.com on the contact portion. If you have a suggestion for a guest, let's have that. And anything else, guys?
No. Getting ready for the 200th episode.
Because you mentioned Mike Santenay,
yeah.
I might want to mention that Mike Santenay is now hosting the writing group that meets at the public library. They're called the Yamhill River Writers, and they meet on, I think, the third Monday of every month. You'd have to call the public library for sure, but
and that's in the Carnegie
one of our
room.
Guys.
Caroline, I think that's in the Carnegie room.
Yes.
Yeah. So there you go. And again, it's just when you know that you're not the only one. And I was actually going to ask about the film club.
Yeah.
Is there any critiquing, script critiquing, or is it you just bring your work
Yeah, well, it's. I would say that critiquing is not necessarily the right word. I would say that what we would do is if you have a completed script, we would assign roles and we table read it, and that's one of the best ways, obviously, to hear a screenplay is just to hear it read out with somebody reading the screen direction and then people reading the parts, and then we kind of talk about it. How did it make us feel? What was kind of rough? Okay, this didn't really make sense. And I think that really gets people to buy into making a film with a community of people, because you've all read through it so many times, you feel a little bit of ownership over it.
Absolutely.
Oh, that was my suggestion that they go through the door at that time, or something like that.
Yeah.
So what I would say to people is that education, having worked in education now and talked to a lot of kids who go to college, education's become very high stakes, in my opinion. You go to college and you take out loans, and if you don't like what you chose as a major, or you don't like what you chose as an area of study, or you have a bad year, you're out a life-changing amount of money.
Yeah.
And it couldn't be more different here. You come in and you try something and it costs you nothing, other than, a few hours of your time. And if you really enjoy it, well, then you can continue to spend no money and you can learn all kinds of different things.
I can't even afford that.
Yes, you can afford that.
So that's one thing that I really enjoy, is because, it is very low stakes environment. Somebody could learn, and mess something up for 2 straight hours. It's not going to bother me. That's their journey of learning something. So I would invite people to come in and make things. And, if you go back and look at the first episodes of this show, they look a lot different than they do now.
They look a lot
that
shorter.
That improvement, and that's
the
all it
host
takes.
looks a lot younger. That's one thing. Oh my goodness. So guys, we are going to wrap it up, but thank you. Next couple of weeks, we're going to talk to Christine Bader, who I am so anxious to talk with. Very impressed.
What do you think? We done?
I don't know. You guys want to do one just with yourself
as
without
long
me
as
doing
they
the
think we're
longest?
done.